Thank you very much for staying. Welcome back to the market, please. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta is expected to announce some marginal cuts in the government's expenditure and revenue for this year shortly as he appears before Parliament to review targets set out in the 2017 budget. George Rafe tells us more.
Ken Ofori-Atta is doing the presentation today because the Public Financial Management Act requires the Finance Minister to appear before Parliament not later than July 31 to update the House on how the economy has performed for the first 6 months of the year and how government expects things to look like for the next half of the year. Joy Business understands that the expected cuts in expenditure by the Finance Minister would be marginal and would focus on non-essential expenditure items. This is to ensure that some critical government policies like the One District, One Factory, free SHS, and planting for food and jobs are not affected. These adjustments Joy Business is learning is to ensure that government stays within the financial targets as captured in the Public Financial Management Act. The minister is likely to review the benchmark price for crude exports, which was initially pegged at $56 a barrel in the 2017 budget, and was hoping to get $550 million for the state by the end of this year in terms of revenue. However, with the challenges of the crude price, which has declined to about $52 a barrel, the projected revenue must be changed. This could also lead to projects that were drawing its funding from this revenue cut. All these changes are geared towards containing the budget deficit, which will be reviewed downwards from 6.5%. However, sources close to government has ruled out a supplementary budget despite this review. The finance minister would also be making some adjustments to the revenue targets. It was hoping to get a total revenue of 44 billion Ghana cedis. However, challenges with numbers for the first 5 months of this year means that the estimates must be changed. Sources say all these things are meant to restore some credibility to government fiscal policy and give some real numbers to those who have invested in the economy so they can plan well.
All right, so time now to send you straight to Parliament, where the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta is presenting the 2017 budget review statement.
Honourable members, correction of votes and proceedings. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Page 13. Page 14. Page 15. Yes, Honorable.
Most grateful, Right Honourable Speaker. Right Honourable Speaker, I have been trying to catch your attention since you got to page 10 of the votes and proceedings. Just to indicate that the fourth paragraph on page 10, you also added that you will be inviting the relevant authorities to your office. That consequential order has been omitted, and I just want to draw the attention of the table office. I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Any further corrections? Honorable members, the votes and proceedings of Friday, 28 July 2017, as corrected, are hereby accepted as true record of proceedings. Official report dated 25th July. Any corrections? Honorable members, there is an indication that His Excellency the Vice President will join in this sitting. Any correction on the official report? Honorable members, there being no correction, the official report dated 25th July 2017 is hereby adopted as true record of the proceedings. Honorable members, we shall vary the order paper and move on to the addendum. Still before the commencement of public business. Item 1, statement by the Minister for Finance on the mid-year fiscal policy review of the 2017 budget statement and economic policy. Honorable Minister for Finance, Honorable Majority Leader, Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister is here and ready to present the mid-year review. And in the meantime, if I could plead with Right Honourable Speaker that we can, at the moment, usher into the chamber His Excellency the Vice President, so that when he's seated, the Finance Minister could proceed with the mid-year review. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Minister of Finance, we make your statement. Honorable Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I note that you have invited the Honorable Minister for Finance, reference order paper addendum, which reads, statement by the Minister for Finance on the mid-year fiscal policy review of the 2017 budget statement and economic policy. Mr. Speaker, I'm holding with me here Act 921, the Public Financial Management Act of 2016, and it provides in Section 28, and with your indulgence, I quote, "The minister shall, not later than the 31st of July of each financial year, prepare and submit to Parliament a mid-year fiscal policy review."
Minority Leader, please state the appropriate sections.
Mr. Speaker, I'm referencing Public Financial Management Act 2016.
Yes.
Act 921, Section 28 is what? Subsection 1. The minister shall not later than 31st of July of each financial year prepare and submit to Parliament a mid-year fiscal policy review. I understand that he's coming to make a statement, just that we have an understanding. Is it a statement within the remit of Section 28 of the Public Financial Management Act? Or, Mr. Speaker,
order.
We are contemplating him further on Article 1798 of the Constitution, so we want to follow him through. If it's just a statement of purpose to the House to apprise us of development, but not a review of a policy which was approved by motion by this House, I just thought that, Mr. Speaker, we should be guided. Our understanding will be he is not requesting this House for any action or any decision or a review of a policy, but a statement to the House on his performance so far. I so submit, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, this indeed is the first time the Minister of Finance is coming under the Public Financial Management Act to present a mid-year review to this House. Mr. Speaker, we've had some discussions backroom before coming here, and I thought the understanding was that we'd rather do a statement.
Honorable members, a point has been made. Another argument is being made. Shall we listen or not?
Mr. Speaker, mid-year reviews that we have had really have related to a review of the performance of the economy under the ambit of a budget that would have been approved by this House. Usually, and indeed, every time we have had a review, it has come concomitantly with a supplementary budget. Now, the supplementary budget requires a decision to be made on that. And that is why they have come by way of motion. Because, Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, a question will have to be put and a determination will have to be made by this House. And that is why it is required to come under a motion. In this case, the difference is that the minister is coming by way of information transmission. And to the extent, patience. Mr. Speaker, to the extent that a question will not be put on information that is transmitted by this House, it is not required of the presenter to come by emotion. And Mr. Speaker, the section that my colleague quoted, 28.1 he quoted. Now, 21.2 provides The mid-year fiscal policy review shall include the following information. And it lists A, B, C, D, and where necessary, in E, plans for submitting a proposed supplementary budget for approval by Parliament. That would require approval. The supplementary budget will require approval. And the question will have to be put on that. To the extent that approval will not be sought for information transmission, it's not required to come under a motion. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
Honorable Minority Leader, do you intend any further comment? Honorable Minority Leader, do you intend any further comment?
Mr. Speaker, I have heard the Majority Leader state emphatically that is one of information provision to the Parliament of Ghana. There being no requirement for Parliament to take any action other than to listen and probably, Mr. Speaker, with your leave to comment on it, we are good to go. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, our Order 76, Sub 2, a Minister of State may make an announcement or statement of government policy. Any such announcement or statement should be limited to facts which deemed necessary to make known to the House. It should not be designed to provoke debate, etc., etc. A member may comment briefly, subject to some limitations. This is not mutually exclusive at all of the Financial Management Act 2016 or the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana. It is well within the remit of a Minister of State responsible for finance. Honourable Minister, you may proceed.
Honorable Speaker and honorable members of Parliament, in accordance with Section 28 of the Public Financial Management Act 2016, Act 921, I stand before this august House to present a mid-year fiscal policy review of the 2017 budget. The 2017 mid-year review is the first under the Public Financial Management Act 2016, Act 921. Mr. Speaker, before I proceed to make this presentation, I wish to convey our heartfelt appreciation to this august House on behalf of the President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, for the cooperation and support of honorable members in the management of the economy over the past few months. It is our expectation that we continue to strengthen this relationship towards the achievement of our collective development goals. Mr. Speaker, I came straight here from the Jubilee House, and I'm happy to say that the President, like Caleb, is still as passionate and strong today about Ghana as he was as a young leader during the PMFJ days in 1977 and the Kumi Prego activities in 1995. He is just as vigorous to go into battle as he has exemplified in the Galamsey filth, poverty, in the Galamsey battle to rid our dear hill country of Galamsey filth, poverty, and corruption. I bring to this august house the President's strong greetings and that you continue to join him in the Lord's battle to bring progress and prosperity to all Ghanaians. Mr. Speaker, the Lord has been merciful to us as a nation, and every morning I acknowledge the Lord. But our burden is heavy, and I ask for his favor and say like Moses, remember, Lord, that this nation is your people. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that we can all testify that our nation has indeed come very far from the cloud of despondency and head hanging to a renewed spirit of optimism and confidence, even in these 6 months, under the bold and focused leadership of President Akufo-Addo. Mr. Speaker, I am indeed blessed at this time to be Minister of Finance of our great republic. I have no doubt that President Akufo-Addo's administration will transform our nation and result in the greatest economic prosperity for all of our people. As I sit in my office, I worry about our courage to face the truth. But if we do not lay out ourselves in the service of mankind or of Ghana, whom then shall we serve? So we need to work harder, consciously, and face some truths as a collective. I read about a Methodist Reverend Atoahima. The author, Mr. Speaker, Order. 1863 to 1921. The author of the Gold Coast Nation and National Consciousness. And he wrote in the Gold Coast Methodist Times in 1897 the following, and I quote, "As a people, we have ceased to be a thinking nation. Our forebears, with all their limitations and disadvantages, had occasion to originate ideas and to contrive in their own order. They sowed incorruptible thought seeds, and we are reaping the rich harvest today. Though for the most part, we are scarcely conscious of the debt we owe them. Our national lives is semi-paralyzed, our mental machinery is dislocated, the inevitable consequence being, speaking generally, the resultant production of a race of men and women who think too little and talk too much. It is time, Mr. Speaker, to begin a national conversation on our values, our citizenhood, and in particular, our collective responsibility to protect the public purse. It is only when each of us, as citizens, protects the republic that these seeds for growth and jobs being sown by President Akufo-Addo will continue to yield 100-fold and more. The national conversation of a thinking nation, a nation that is slow to talk but quick to listen, should begin now. Mr. Speaker, on the 2nd of March 2017, I stood before this honorable House to present to you the President's first budget statement, the Asempa budget. Which brought hope back to Ghanaians and sowed the seeds for growth, prosperity, and jobs. After the approval of the budget on 31st March 2016, we went to work in a hurry to deliver on the first important job of bringing back stability and predictability into the economy. So far, this has, Mr. Speaker, been reasonably achieved. Mr. Speaker, because of the prudent economic policies, improved fiscal discipline, and competent management of the economy, the macro indicators for the first half of the year are pointing in the right direction. Typical of the strengthening performance is the fact that for the first 6 months of the new Akufo-Addo government, both the fiscal deficit and primary balance outperformed their targets. The exchange rate is stabilizing, inflationary pressures have eased, and interest rates are trending downwards. Progressively, confidence is being restored in the economy, and we are confident that this positive trend will be sustained in the months and years ahead. Achieving macroeconomic stability is not an end in itself. What it has done, however, is to provide the country, especially the private sector, with a platform to grow the economy, create jobs, and improve incomes for workers. Mr. Speaker, through the cooperation of this august House, for which we are very grateful, we passed the Income Tax Amendment Act 2017, Act 941, the Customs and Excise Petroleum Taxes and Petroleum-Related Levies, Repeal Act 2017, Act 943, the Special Import Levy Amendment Act 2017, Act 944, the Energy Sector Levies Amendment Act 2017, Act 947, Value Added Tax Amendment Act 2017, Act 948, and the Earmark Funds Capping and Realignment Act 2017, Act 947. Special Petroleum Tax Amendment Act 2017, Act 942, and Customs Amendment Act 2017, Act 947. This is an incredible amount of work, and we thank the honorable members for this. Mr. Speaker, as a result and in fulfillment of the President's promise, government has abolished the 1% special import levy, which was imposed mainly on imported raw materials and machinery, abolished the 17.5% VAT NHIL on financial services, abolished the 17.5% VAT NHIL imposed on airline tickets, abolished the excise duty on petroleum to reduce the excess burden on final customers, reduced the special petroleum tax from 17.5% to 15% to mitigate the excess burden on final consumers, abolished the 5% VAT flat rate on the sale of real estate, abolished import duty on spare parts, exempted from tax the gains from realization of securities listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange, reviewed the ESLA to reduce the cost of power and reduce the National Electrification Scheme levy from 5% to 3%, and the Public Lighting levy from 5% to 2%, replace the 17.5% standard rate with a 3% flat VAT NHIL rate for supplies by retailers and wholesalers, and cap funds to 25% of tax revenue. Mr. Speaker, we'll be coming back to Parliament this week to date the regulations to abolish the 17.5% VAT NHL on selected imported medicines which are currently not produced locally. Mr. Speaker, with this background and in accordance with the PFM Act, my presentation of this mid-year fiscal policy review will focus on the following broad thematic areas: an overview of recent macroeconomic developments, an update of macroeconomic forecasts contained in the 2017 budget, an analysis of the total revenue, expenditure, and financing performance, a presentation of a revised 2017 macro-fiscal framework, and the implications of the revised budget outlook for the medium-term fiscal and expenditure framework, and key highlights of 2017 budget implementation. updates on macro developments in 2016. Mr. Speaker, in the 2017 budget, we provided information on macro fiscal developments for the 2016 fiscal year. We, however, now have updated information, which has resulted in the revision of some of the macro fiscal variables for 2016. With your permission, Mr. Speaker, let me provide updates on these macroeconomic indicators. GDP growth. Provisional data released by the Ghana Statistical Service in April 2017 showed that real GDP growth for 2016 was 3.5%, against the provisional estimate of 3.6% reported in the 2017 budget, and lower than the 3.8% recorded for 2015, the lowest in over 15 years. The services sector, which though was the best growth performer in 2016, recorded a growth of barely 5.7%, followed by the agriculture sector growing at 3%, and the industry sector, which contracted by 1.4%. The economy we inherited, Mr. Speaker, was severely impaired. Mr. Speaker, on the fiscal front, updated information shows that the end 2016 fiscal deficit was worse than previously estimated, at 9.3% of GDP compared to the provisional figure of 8.7% of GDP on cash basis at the time of presenting the 2017 budget. This represents the worst performance since the record deficit of 2012, essentially questioning where progress was made over the previous 4 years to get the economy going. The deficit on commitment basis is now at 10.9% of GDP, up from 10.3% previously reported. This revision has been occasioned by the reversal of interest payments of the non-marketable instrument that fell due at the end of 2016 but recorded as part of 2017 flows, as well as the revision of the 2016 GDP by the Ghana Statistical Services in April 2017. Mr. Speaker, in recent years, the country has unfortunately accumulated a large amount of debt, which resulted in the country being at a high risk of debt distress and putting our economic development in jeopardy. From a debt stock of 9.5 billion at the end of 2008, it increased to 122.3 billion at the end of 2016, an increase of debt stock, Mr. Speaker, by 1,154%. The debt servicing payments arising from this legacy of debt accumulation amounts to some 45% of total domestic revenue. Unfortunately, our economy will have to live with this burden for some time as we make efforts to repair the damage. The revised 2016 nominal GDP of 167.3 billion puts the public debt to GDP ratio at 73.1% of GDP against the 72.5% reported in the 2017 budget presented to this House earlier this year. Mr. Speaker, we inherited a weak economy characterized by characterized by high fiscal deficit, 9.3% of GDP on a cash basis against the then target of 5% on a cash basis. A primary deficit, Mr. Speaker, of 1.4% of GDP against a target surplus of 1.2%. A high debt to GDP ratio, 73.1% of GDP. High inflation, 15.4%. Low credit to the private sector. High interest rate, 91-day T-bill rates at 16.4%. Weak domestic revenue mobilization. Low external reserves of 2.8 months of import cover. Policy reversals, including some unconstrained expenditure. 7 billion of outstanding commitments and undischarged obligations. And weak economic growth 3.5% lowest in 15 years. But, Mr. Speaker, permit me to reassure this August House that the Akufo-Addo government is not daunted by these dreadful statistics that were passed on to us. Mr. Speaker, to put the performance of the economy in the first half of 2017 into perspective, it will be useful to remind ourselves of the macroeconomic targets we set for ourselves for the 2017 fiscal year based on overall macroeconomic objectives of government. Consistent with our medium-term development priorities, the macroeconomic framework for 2017 aims at ensuring macroeconomic stability, shifting the focus of economic management from taxation to production, protecting the preferential option for the poor, and making the machinery of government work to deliver the benefits of progress for all Ghanaians. Anchored on the medium-term macroeconomic framework, the specific macroeconomic targets set for 2017 were as follows: overall GDP growth rate of 6.3%, non-oil GDP growth rate of 4.6%, end-year inflation rate of 11.2%, average inflation rate of 12.4%, overall fiscal deficit of 6.5% of GDP, a primary surplus of 0.4% of GDP, and gross foreign assets to cover at least 3 months of imports of goods and services. Mr. Speaker, developments from January up to June 2017 indicate that the President's policies and programs are yielding the expected results, and in some cases, exceeding expectations. The GDP for the first quarter of 2017 grew by 6.6% against 4.4% for the same period in 2016. Inflation reduced to 12.1% at the end of June 2017 from 15.4% at end December 2016. Interest rates are on the decline. For example, the 91-day Treasury bill rates have reduced from 16.4% at end 2016 to 12.08% at end June 2017. The fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP for the period January to June 2017 was 2.7% compared with a deficit of 4% over the same period in 2016. The primary surplus for January to June 2016 was 0.6% of GDP compared to a deficit of 1.3% over the same period in 2016. And the gross international reserves at the end of June 2017 was $5.9 billion, the equivalent of 3.4 months of import cover, up from $4.9 billion at the end of December 2016, equivalent to 2.8 months of import cover. Mr. Speaker, interest rates have responded to government's economic policies and are now trending downwards. The Bank of Ghana reduced its monetary policy rate MPR by 450 basis points from January to July 2017, 200 basis points from 25.5% to 23.5% in March 2017, by 100 basis points in May to 22.5%, and further by 150 basis points to 21% in July 2017. The trend of lower interest rates we are seeing is in direct response to the equally consistent declines in headline inflation and inflation expectations, and the general improvements in the macroeconomic fundamentals. In response, the average interest rate on the 91-day bill has declined since December 2016 from 16.81% to 12.10% in June 2017, while the rates on the 182-day Treasury bill rate fell from 18.5% in December 2016 to 13.28% in June 2016. Mr. Speaker, fiscal policy in the 2017 budget was designed to restore confidence in the economy, ensure fiscal and debt sustainability, and promote overall macroeconomic stability. Preliminary fiscal data for the period indicates that the overall fiscal deficit was 2.7% of GDP against a target of 3.5%. The primary balance for the period was a surplus of 0.6% of GDP against a targeted deficit of 0.01%. The lower than program deficit resulted from both revenues and expenditures falling below their respective targets. Total revenue and grants fell below target by 14.9%, and total expenditure, including the clearance of arrears, was consequently aligned to match revenue inflows and thus was below target by 16.7%. Mr. Speaker, total revenue and grants for the period amounted to 17.5 billion, 8.6% of GDP, against a target of 20.5 billion, 10.1% of GDP. In nominal terms, the provisional outturn was 6.5% higher than the outturn during the same period in 2016, as shown in Appendix Table 4. Ongoing investigations at the ports have unearthed significant under-declaration amounting to short payments of some 1.2 billion, inclusive of penalty. We are determined to tackle that criminal culture and expect compliance and examination officers to carry out their activities with diligence and honesty or face the consequences. Mr. Speaker, capital expenditure amounted to 2.4 billion, 1.2% of GDP, 81.8% of the period target of 2.9 billion, 1.4% of GDP. Foreign finance capital spending was, however, higher than target due mainly to improve project loan disbursements. Mr. Speaker, at the end of 2016, new arrears of some 5 billion had been accumulated, bringing the total arrears that should be cleared to 7 billion. As I indicated in the 2017 budget statement, we are undertaking an audit of these arrears, which is expected to be completed by October 2017, striving to eliminate all government arrears by end 2019, following the outcome of an audit of the outstanding commitments generated at the end of 2016, and institute stringent measures that will prevent the accumulation of new ones. To this end, the clearance of arrears will be expedited in the second half of the year to ensure that the risk that these arrears pose, especially to our financial sector, is minimized. Mr. Speaker, the audit is expected to be completed in October 2017. Mr. Speaker, the cash fiscal deficit of 5.6 billion, 2.7% of GDP, compared to 6.7 billion, 4% of GDP, recorded in the same period in 2016. This was financed mainly from domestic sources and included a drawdown on government deposits with the Bank of Ghana. Total net domestic financing amounted to 5.5 billion Ghana cedis, while net foreign financing amounted to 76.8 million Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, the primary balance recorded a surplus of 0.6% of GDP against a target deficit of 0.01%, an indication that our fiscal effort is on track. This should ensure a lower rate of debt accumulation. Mr. Speaker, the petroleum receipts in the first half of 2017 amounted to $277.79 million compared to the year-end projection of $515.57 million. The revenue accrued from the Ghana Group's first and second 10 liftings, as well as the 35th to 37th Jubilee field liftings. The proceeds for the first 10 and 35th Jubilee liftings undertaken in December 2016 were achieved in the first quarter of 2017. Mr. Speaker, in nominal terms, the gross public debt stock stood at a provisional figure of $138.5 billion, $31.7 billion as at the end of June 2017. The stock comprised external and domestic debt of $74.6 billion and Ghana cedis 63.9 billion, respectively. Mr. Speaker, contrary to the annual average rate of debt accumulation of 36.7% per annum over the last 8 years, the rate of accumulation over the last 6 months is only about 13.3%. This signifies an important shift, indicating government seriousness to bringing our debt situation under control. Mr. Speaker, As of end of March 2017, the debt to GDP ratio was estimated to be 70.9%, and given the current trend, we expect the ratio to be around 71% by the end of the year once all the effects of this year's debt reprofiling have materialized. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that while we do not expect the debt reprofiling to add to the existing stock of debt, it is expected, however, that the stock of debt should increase marginally by the already programmed net financing of this year's budget deficit. Mr. Speaker, the medium-term debt management strategy for 2017-2019 is in fulfillment of Section 59 of the Public Financial Management Act 2016, Act 921, and is the first to be prepared under the Act. Mr. Speaker, the chosen strategy is in line with the debt management objectives of borrowing at a minimum cost and maintaining a prudent degree of risk while helping to develop the domestic capital market. It envisages increased interest by non-resident investors in the domestic bond market. Government intends to lower borrowing costs, minimize the growth of short-term domestic debt, and lengthen the maturity profile of domestic debt under the reprofiling program. The net result of this strategy should reduce the rollover refinancing risk and broaden the range of instruments offered in the domestic market. It is important to recognize that reprofiling does not add to public debt, and we intend to do more to ease the debt burden. It remains our expectation, Mr. Speaker, this August House especially, will be united in supporting government efforts to reprofile a significant portion of our national debt stock. Mr. Speaker, we are also tackling the huge pileup of arrears in the energy sector, which continues to impact negatively on our economy. It stifles the capacity of players in the power sector to keep our lights on. It denies the banks liquidity, and in all, frustrates economic activity and growth. That was why streamlining the energy sector legacy debt was made a priority policy initiative in the 2017 budget statement. As indicated, revenue streams from the energy sector levies ESLA will be used to ensure certainty of cash flows for the payment of all corresponding debts. Mr. Speaker, in this regard, 2 joint lead managers have been appointed to establish a special purpose vehicle to issue a domestic medium to long-term energy bond by securitizing the ESLA receivables. Mr. Speaker, since the presentation and approval of the 2017 budget statement and economic policy by this August House in March, there have been some developments, both externally and domestically, which have necessitated a revision in the 2017 fiscal framework consistent with Section 28(2)(d) of the PFM Act. We present the revised budget for the rest of the 2017 fiscal year. The revised assumptions for the 2017 mid-year review relate specifically to non-oil tax revenues and non-oil related expenditures. Mr. Speaker, following the performance of non-oil tax revenues for the first 6 months of the year, the assumptions underlying the projections for some tax types, namely corporate income tax, import VAT, and import duty, are being revised. Together, these amount to 1.5 billion, 0.7% of GDP. To ensure, Mr. Speaker, that we do not compromise our fiscal consolidation objectives and targets, expenditures are planned to match the downward revision in revenues. The downward revision in revenues and expenditure, as well as reclassification of inflows from the sale of shares, have resulted in the revision of the fiscal deficit target from 6.5% of GDP to 6.3%. These revisions are consistent with our fiscal and debt sustainability objectives. Mr. Speaker, be mindful of the high debt burden which has arisen largely because of high fiscal deficit in the past. The revision of the fiscal deficit further demonstrates our commitment to fiscal discipline. Mr. Speaker, going forward, we will strengthen the implementation of revenue measures to ensure that we meet our revised revenue targets. To ensure that the fiscal objectives and targets are not compromised, we will make the necessary downward adjustment to discretionary expenditure in the event that we are not able to meet our revenue targets. Mr. Speaker, total revenue and grant has been revised downwards by 0.9% of GDP from 44.5 billion to 43.1 billion. As earlier stated, the revision to total revenues and grants emanates from revisions made to corporate income tax, import VAT, import duty, as well as the reclassification of expected non-tax revenue inflows from the sale of government shares of 500 million as financing. Mr. Speaker, total expenditures has also been revised downwards by 1.1% of GDP from 58.1 billion to 55.9 billion as shown in Appendix Table 5. The key revisions to expenditure include 0.4% of GDP, adjustment to goods and services, 867 million, 0.3% of GDP, reduction in total transfers to other government units, which comprise all statutory and earmarked funds, 553.2 million, and 0.3% of GDP, 683 million, adjustment to capital expenditure. Mr. Speaker, despite the measures being taken to ensure that we maintain fiscal discipline, government remains strongly committed to investing in infrastructure, growing the economy, and delivering social services to our people through strategic allocation and efficient use of resources. Our social welfare programs, such as the free SHS, NHIS, school feeding, LEAP, and other socioeconomic ones, such as planting for food and jobs, etc., will be protected, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, following these adjustments, the overall fiscal balance is expected to improve from a deficit of 13.2 billion Ghana cedis, 6.5% of GDP, to 12.8 billion, 6.3% of GDP. Total financing of the deficit will comprise a net foreign repayment of 1.3 billion, while net domestic financing will amount to 14.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, the resulting primary balance from the adjustment in revenues, expenditures, and financing is a primary surplus equivalent to 0.2% of GDP, gross domestic product. Mr. Speaker, even though the projected real GDP growth of 6.3% for 2017 has not been revised, the nominal GDP has been revised downwards from 203.4 billion to 202.01 billion, reflecting mainly the revision of the deflator downwards. Mr. Speaker, based on the above considerations, the revised macroeconomic targets are summarized below. Overall GDP growth rate is maintained at 6.3%, with nominal GDP revised slightly to 202 billion from the original projection of 203.41 billion. Non-oil growth rate maintained at 4.6%, end-year inflation rate is maintained at 11.2%. Overall fiscal deficit has been revised downwards from 6.5% of GDP to 6.3% of GDP. Primary balance has been revised from a surplus of 0.4% of GDP to a surplus of 0.2% of GDP, and gross foreign assets to cover at least 3 months of imports of goods and services remain the same as originally programmed. Mr. Speaker, these revisions are consistent with government's resolve to grow the economy and create jobs whilst maintaining macroeconomic stability through fiscal discipline and prudent economic policies. We will strengthen our collaboration with the private sector to address issues such as taxes, energy, and cost of credit that impede their growth and expansion. Mr. Speaker, as a demonstration of our commitment to fiscal discipline, government has taken a decision to introduce a numerical fiscal rule to guide the implementation of fiscal policy. In this regard, we'll bring to this House an amendment to the PFMA Act to limit the fiscal deficit within a range of 3 to 5% of GDP for any fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, some highlights of the 2017 budget. Mr. Speaker, please permit me to now provide you with updates on implementation of some of the major programs for the 2017 fiscal year. Planting for Food and Jobs program. Mr. Speaker, in fulfillment of our promise to Ghanaians, we launched the Planting for Food and Jobs program to increase production, ensure food security, as well as to create jobs. As of June 2017, about 185,907 farmers out of a total of 200,000 farmers targeted for the 2017 cropping season were registered. The farmers are being provided with seeds, fertilizers, and extension services to improve their yields. During the same period, Mr. Speaker, a total of 56,028 bags of improved seeds of maize, rice, soybean, and sorghum, as well as 22,900 sachets of onions, tomatoes, and pepper, were distributed to beneficiary farmers across the 10 regions of Ghana. Mr. Speaker, fertilizer is also being provided at a subsidized rate of 50% to participating farmers. I'm happy to announce that the reports we are receiving suggest that the fertilizer is getting to its intended beneficiaries and at a reduced price. Beneficiary farmers pay 25% of the subsidized price before collection and 25% of the subsidized price before collection and harvest. As of June 2017, a total of 61,568 metric tons out of 156,000 metric tons, 3 million bags was supplied, representing 39.4% of the target. Distribution of fertilizer is ongoing, especially in the 3 northern regions. Mr. Speaker, a total of 822 agricultural extension personnel trained by the agricultural colleges who had been unemployed were recruited and posted to 187 districts across the 10 regions of the country. Mr. Speaker, the incidence of the fall armyworm invasion, which was first reported in April 2016, posed a challenge to increase food production. A total of 112,000 hectares of crops were infested, out of which 14,411 hectares were severely affected. The most affected crops were maize and cowpea. Government responded by setting up a national task force and subcommittees to create awareness and take steps to control the spread of the menace. Over 74,000 liters of various chemicals were procured and distributed to all the 216 districts in the country to control the infestation. Farmers are being educated on early detection of the fall armyworm invasion. The President's commitment, Mr. Speaker, to supporting farmers to feed the country and improve their own lives is very much on course. Mr. Speaker, Ghana's cocoa output, which was over 1 million tons in 2010-2011 crop year, has declined to an average figure of 830,000 tons per annum in the past 5 years. It is the objective of government to reverse this declining trend and to increase production to more than 1 million tons per annum within the next 4 years. Mr. Speaker, in this regard, Ghana Cocoa Board has rolled out the artificial pollination programs, which are aimed at increasing productivity of cocoa farmers from an average yield of 450 kilograms per hectare to over 1,000 kilograms per hectare. Cocoa Board has trained and deployed 10,000 hand pollinators to to assist farmers. It is projected that 24,000 hectares of farms will be pollinated in 2017, with an expected increase to 30,000 hectares in the next 3 years. Mr. Speaker, in light of the estimated 22% of the country's current cocoa trees classified as over-aged moribund or CSSVD infected, Cocoa Board, with support from government, has continued the cocoa rehabilitation program. The Speaker, Cocoa Board has also reformed the mass cocoa spraying to involve greater private sector participation and farmer ownership. Mr. Speaker, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire produce about 60% of the world's cocoa and face common challenges in production and marketing of the beans, to which individual country-specific solutions are not sufficient to remedy. Mr. Speaker, under the determined leadership of His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo and his Ivorian counterpart, His Excellency Alassane Ouattara, the Ghana-Cote d'Ivoire cooperation has been renewed and energized, leading to a meeting in April in Abidjan, followed by a second meeting in Accra in June 2017. The meetings have set out the framework of the cooperation and worked out details of its implementation. The implementation decisions and initial successes so far include a common strategy, anti-smuggling initiative, a funding arrangement to undertake critical projects in both countries, increasing use of cocoa butter equivalents, and formation of a new producer organization. Education. Mr. Speaker, a Ghanaian student is eligible to benefit from the free SHS policy if she writes the Basic Education Certificate examination from 2017 and is placed by the computerized school selection and placement system into a publicly funded second cycle institution. Beneficiaries of this government scholarship will enjoy it for a period of 3 years. Foreigners are excluded from the free SHS. Mr. Speaker, to ensure that the poor and the vulnerable are not left behind, students from disadvantaged backgrounds will be considered for placement. To prepare them adequately for a successful SHS program, special in-school tuition will be provided for them. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, 30% of vacancies in elite schools will be reserved for students from public junior high schools. Mr. Speaker, government is taking the necessary steps to ensure that the quality of education is not compromised as a result of the implementation of the free SHS program. In this regard, a number of interventions have been outlined as part of the implementation program. Notable amongst them are the following: provision of 4 core textbooks for all first-year students, rationalization of teacher deployment and training at the SHL level, optimization of instruction time by extending the school day as well as the number of instructional days, establishment of robust school inspection and accountability systems, and 1 hot meal a day for day students. Health. Mr. Speaker, the government planned to restore health training allowance in 2017, starting with the 2017-18 academic year. All health trainees in public training institutions will receive allowance starting 2017. The Ministry of Health has made provisions for 149 million Ghana cedis to pay for the 4 months ending December 2017. This will enable the health trainees to concentrate on their education, reduce hardship, especially on students from vulnerable and poor families, and avoid disruptions in the school curriculum system. Restructuring of the National Health Insurance Scheme. Mr. Speaker, the NHS has undergone several changes since its inspection. At the time this government took office, the scheme was facing challenges in claims management, e-claims, delays in processing of claims, coupled with other challenges in administration and management of the NHIA. The government promised to restructure NHIS and make it more efficient and effective. Mr. Speaker, a committee has been put in place to review the report and put together a plan for restructuring the scheme. LEAP implementation. Mr. Speaker, presently the LEAP program has 203,000 households in all 216 districts in all 10 regions of Ghana. Out of the 248,000 beneficiary households, 193,920 beneficiaries are registered and receive payment on the e-Switch platform operated by the Ghana Interbank Payment and Settlement System. The remaining beneficiary households are in the process of being registered onto the e-Switch platform. Total payments made from January 3rd to 31st July 2017 is 56,307,670 cedis. The government is currently working on a productive and financial inclusion strategy to facilitate the graduation of LEAP beneficiaries from cash transfer programs. School feeding. Mr. Speaker, the concept of the program is to provide children in selected public kindergartens and primary schools in deprived areas of the country with one hot, nutritious meal per school day using locally grown foodstuffs. The immediate objectives of the program are increasing school enrollment, attendance and retention, reduce hunger and malnutrition, and boost domestic food production. The long term is to contribute to poverty reduction and food security in Ghana. Currently, the program feeds 1,671,777 children in 5,530 schools in all 216 districts and provides employment for over 4,730 caterers. Energy. Mr. Speaker, the energy sector, particularly the electricity subsector, has been a major challenge to the growth of the economy in the past years before we took over the administration of the country. The difficulties and unstable electricity supply had created significant constraints on industrial production and socio-economic activities in the country. Besides stabilizing the electricity supply, government has made significant progress with respect to the interventions that were promised in the 2017 budget statement. Government has taken steps, Mr. Speaker, to deal with the financial difficulties in the sector. Cabinet has approved the implementation of the cash waterfall mechanism, which together with the Energy Legacy Debt Restructuring Program is intended to resolve the perennial cash flow difficulties in the energy sector. Steps are being taken to implement the cash waterfall management immediately. Mr. Speaker, we inherited a power sector which had contracted so many power purchase agreements well beyond the country's demand, which had the potential to exacerbate the already dire financial crisis in the sector. As promised by His Excellency the President in the 2017 State of the Nation Address, Cabinet is deliberating the strategy paper submitted by the Ministry of Energy towards rationalizing the PPAs to ensure least cost power generation capacity additions. On the regulatory front, Cabinet has approved the establishment of the Electricity Market Oversight Panel, EMOP. The EMOP has been provided under the Electricity Regulations, LI 1937, but has not seen the light of day since 2008. The EMOP is to be inaugurated in August 2017 to begin implementation of its mandate. Mr. Speaker, one key intervention that government has promised in the 2017 budget was the restructuring of VRA to bring about increased operational efficiency and private sector investment in the power sector. Government has approved the VRA restructuring agenda submitted by the Ministry to Cabinet, and processes towards the implementation of the restructuring agenda have begun under the coordination of the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Speaker, in the renewable energy front, government has given approval to Bui Power to collaborate with Sino-Hydro to construct a 250-megawatt solar power facility to operate as a hybrid electricity generation source to complement the hydroelectricity so that Bui Power Plant can enhance its electricity generation capacity during off-peak periods. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, we inherited from the previous government liquefied natural gas supply contracts that were mispriced. Prices were higher than indigenous sources of gas and in some cases higher than the crude oil it was designed to displace. We have restructured and renegotiated the terms of LNG supply such that the price is now below that of indigenous gas and guaranteed for the long term to be below that of alternative fuels such as light crude oil. Our successful renegotiations of these LNG contracts will result, Mr. Speaker, in saving close to $1 billion. Mr. Speaker, these initiatives are aimed at achieving reduction in the per kilowatt price of electricity for industry and households. Mr. Speaker, as part of government's effort to improve public mass transportation, the ministry initiated processes for the acquisition of buses for the 2 public bus companies. The objective is to improve the current bus fleet of Metro Mass and Intercity State Transport Corporation. In all, a total of 800 buses will be acquired. This includes 200 compressed natural gas and 500 diesel buses for Metro Mass Transit and the remaining 100 buses for ISTC. Railway development. Mr. Speaker, the establishment of a Ministry of Railway Development was to address what the President has continuously described as one of the greatest tragedies of our post-colonial developments from the colonial legacy of 947 kilometers at independence. Barely 30% was operational in January 2017. The renewed interest that has been generated in the sector by over 200 companies, both local and foreign, expressing interest in participating in the redevelopment of the rail sector, more than justify the wisdom in setting up a ministry to focus on the redevelopment of the sector. Mr. Speaker, Tema to Akosombo has commenced and is projected to complete by mid-2020. On the Eastern Line, a feasibility study is ready to trigger a procurement process. On the Central Spine, we have commenced the process of procuring a consultant to undertake a feasibility. Roads and highways. Mr. Speaker, the ministry maintained its focus on routine and periodic maintenance activities to protect the huge investments made by government in the provision of the road sector. As at the end of June 2017, routine maintenance had been undertaken on 6,233 kilometers, 52% of the approved work plan of the trunk roads, 8,899 kilometers, 39% of the approved work plan on the feeder road network, and 6,000 kilometers, 59% of the approved work plan on the urban road network. Mr. Speaker, within the same period, periodic maintenance activities comprising re-graveling, spot improvement, and resealing work had been carried out on 199 kilometers, 100 kilometers of the approved work plan, and 180 kilometers on the trunk, feeder, and urban road networks, respectively. Periodic maintenance activities on the urban roads were mostly focused on resealing and asphalt overlay, which works saw 100 kilometers of road asphalted in MMDAs such as Tema and Accra. Minor rehabilitation work covering minor upgrading and the construction of culverts and drainage systems have been carried out. Mankasim Abura Dunkwa, in Koko New Aburim, Pong Katamansu and Gulf City area, Third Ring Road in Tamale, asphaltic overlay of 50 kilometers of road, Aifua area roads, Hem Nyohegbe Wegbi feeder roads phase 2, Ainaso Daimanyim phase 1 road. These have been 100% completed. The development activities undertaken, including rehabilitation, reconstruction, construction of bridges, and upgrading the details of progress on some of the projects are shown below. In Samwama Peja Road, Taku Bogoso, Aguna Junction, Elubo, Ayamfura, Sanwinso, Wa and Han, Kaswa Interchange and Ancillary, dualization of whole main, construction of whole bypass, Bogatanga Boku Polmakom, in Kwanta, Utidamango, 50 kilometers extra, and Brekum Siapa. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry's Public-Private Partnership Program for the financing, construction, and management of road infrastructure is progressing steadily. Currently, the pre-feasibility study of the Accra-Takoradi project is being updated, while that for Accra-Tema is almost completed. Water and sanitation. Mr. Speaker, government has secured a 48.85 million loan from the Africa Development Bank to improve sanitation conditions in the Greater Accra region in a 5-year project. Government is also focused on delivering improved sanitation for all, consistent with the Sustainable Development Goal 6 through its key initiatives such as Water for All and Toilets for All. A sector-wide strategic plan has been completed, setting a roadmap on how to address the constraints confronting the sector and how to overcome them. Combating galamsey, illicit mining. Mr. Speaker, the previous piecemeal attempt of solving the challenge of illicit mining in the country has not seen any significant result. The government has therefore put together a 5-year project called Multilateral Mining Integration Project. This will address the problem over the 5-year period, creating over 500,000 job opportunities in phases. Training 100,000 small-scale miners, reclaiming 7,140 kilometers of total land size in Ghana, prospecting of 2,500 kilometers, build skills for employment, create 100,000 jobs, and create 20,000 acres of oil palm plantation. Currently, government has constituted a 7-member ministerial team to provide a medium-term solution. Government has already disbursed 56 million to an emergency program. Most of the degraded areas have been tested for mercury levels and are ready for reclamation. Over 3,000 floating platforms on most of the rivers in Ashanti, Eastern, Central, Western, and Brown Harbour regions have been removed from those rivers. More than 1,300 earth-moving equipment have also been taken out from the sites. Our rivers are showing signs of improvement, thereby returning our treatment plants back to work. YEA. Mr. Speaker, the agency with approximately 62,000 beneficiaries have since June this year introduced beneficiary time sheets to address the practice whereby beneficiaries are paid without any records of work done. The agency is ensuring value for money, protecting the public purse and efficiency, and has increased the beneficiaries' monitoring assistance from 256 to 600. The agency has started a process to recruit, Mr. Speaker, over 60,000 unemployed youth under the following modules: youth in security, youth in afforestation, youth in graduate internship, youth in paid internship, and youth in sanitation. Establishment of the Zongo Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, broad consultations with relevant stakeholders were undertaken towards the establishment of the Zongo Development Fund. A total of 3,548 stakeholders, including members of parliament, development partners, traditional rulers, Zongo chiefs, youth leaders, MMDAs, representatives of political parties, were consulted. Cabinet has granted approval for the policy. The bill will be submitted to Parliament before the end of the year. Mr. Speaker, work has started on a number of initiatives in the 2017 budget to empower the private sector. Mr. Speaker, after years of unstable power supply, doomsday, and macroeconomic instability, businesses, especially manufacturing, were negatively impacted. As part of the response, a quick disbursing stimulus fund has been created to support distressed but viable companies. To date, over 350 applications have been received, out of which 80 have been selected for support in the first phase of the program. The second phase of the exercise is ready to commence. Mr. Speaker, under the government's industrial transformation agenda, the implementation of the One District, One Factory, 1D, 1F initiative has commenced. A program implementation framework which sets the modalities of implementation has been prepared. To date, The technical support group for the program has already reviewed 234 businesses for the IDYF initiative. About 59% of these applications are from the manufacturing sector, while 33% are from the agribusiness sector. It is envisaged that more than 50 districts will start actual implementation of the enterprises by year end, with the potential to generate about 80,000 direct and indirect jobs. Mr. Speaker, in order to improve the business environment to make the country an attractive destination for investments and make Ghana the most business-friendly nation in Africa, a comprehensive program for business regulatory reform has been launched. This includes the following: reforms at improving Ghana's ranking on World Bank Ease of Doing Business, establishing an electronic register for business regulations, conduct a rolling review of business regulations to ensure real-time response to regulatory reforms, design targeted regulatory reliefs for SMEs in order to reduce entry barriers for young entrepreneurs and startups, and establish regulatory reform units within MDAs to conduct regulatory impact assessments. This will lead to the creation of a permanent system of quality control for the introduction of new business regulation. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo has launched the National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Plan to support startup and early-stage businesses with a seed capital of the Ghana cedi equivalent of $10 million. The NEIP will include business development services, incubator hubs, and business accelerator services. Infrastructure for poverty eradication. Mr. Speaker, the promise to tackle infrastructure challenges in the at the constituency level, especially in rural and deprived communities, is very much on course. The Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication Program will deliver the one district, one factory, one village, one dam, small business development, agriculture infrastructure, water for all projects, and sanitation projects. Other constituency-based infrastructure projects, including culverts, school buildings, and community-based health planning and services compounds, will also be funded under IPEP. Establishment of the development authorities. Mr. Speaker, we commence the process to establish the development authorities to ensure that the IPEP and other local initiatives are implemented in a well-coordinated manner. The three bills for the establishment of the three development authorities, namely Northern Development Authority to take care of the Upper East, Upper West, and Northern regions, Middle Belt Development Authority for the Ashanti, Eastern, and the Brong-Ahafo regions, and the Coastal Development Authority for the Volta, Greater Accra, Central, and Western regions, will be laid before this August House shortly. Mr. Speaker, the ministry has set up a committee to carry out an extensive study and recommend legislative reviews necessary to ensure the election of our MMDCEs. A roadmap has been developed to guide the legislative reviews and stakeholder consultation toward election of MMDCEs. His Excellency the President has also announced during the orientation of MMDCEs the appointment of the current MMDCEs was the last in Ghana. Mr. Speaker, progress has also been made on all three components aimed at formalizing the economy. These are the National Digital Property Addressing System, the National Identification Scheme, and the interoperability of banking and mobile communication platform. Various technical committees were constituted to prepare a roadmap for the implementation of these projects, subsequent to which service providers have been and are being selected. Government is on course to completing the National Digital Property Addressing System, upon which the issuance of national identity cards will commence in October 2017. The interoperability project is also scheduled for completion by end 2017. Mr. Speaker, Our commitment in the financial services sector is to implement reforms to strengthen the pensions and insurance industry to ensure the availability of cheaper long-term capital for the private sector. Over the past 6 months, we have finalized the National Financial Inclusion Strategy, which aims to increase access to finance from the current national average of 58% to 75% by 2023. We are also working to commit 20% of the proceeds from the G20 Compact of Africa to strengthen the financial sector, focusing on venture capital financing and support for small and medium-scale industries. Mr. Speaker, as of April 2017, the banking sector comprised 33 universal banks with a combined network of 1,377 branches across the country. Despite the strong performance of the banking sector for the first 4 months of the year, as evidenced by the improved performance in asset growth, the sector is still threatened by the high non-performing loans. We are, however, confident that with the planned issuance of the energy sector bond in the coming months, the non-performing loans ratio will improve significantly, and with increased liquidity, our banks will be in a better position to deliver cheaper credit to the private sector. Over the past 6 months, we have started the process of lengthening and normalizing the yield curve, lowering benchmark interest rates, and pursuing macroeconomic stability to position the capital markets for growth. Specifically, government introduced the 15-year fixed benchmark bond aimed at lengthening the maturity profile of the domestic debt and, more importantly, to serve as a reference benchmark for pricing of corporate issuance. Activities in the secondary market on the Ghana fixed income market have been very encouraging, with about 21 corporate bonds having liquidity premium decline from 2.48 basis points in April 2016 to 1.46 basis points in April 2017. Interest on the decline, especially on short-term instruments, and contributing to the normalization of the yields. The equity capital market also recorded encouraging performance for the first half of the year. The Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index closed at 1,964.55 points in June 2017 from 1,689.1 points in December 2016, a 16.3% increase year to date. Total market capitalization increased to 59.457 billion Ghana cedis in June 2017 from 52 billion in December 2016. Mr. Speaker, total assets of the insurance industry stood at about 3.64 billion at the end of March 2017, as against 3.49 billion in December 2017. In line with the 2017 budget, we've started a process for the Ministries of Finance and Employment and Labor Relations to co-supervise the National Pensions Regulatory Authority. This is an important step towards streamlining the regulations of the pensions and insurance industry. Mr. Speaker, in April 27, workers who had failed to biometrically register with SNP had their salaries suspended. Preparatory works are also ongoing to interface the government payroll of SNP biometric database, as well as register the government Cap 30 workers on the SNP biometric database before the end of the year. In order, Mr. Speaker, to implement the Treasury Single Account in compliance with provisions in the PFMA Act, a liquidity impact assessment of the closure of accounts with commercial banks was completed and the impact found to be minimal. We have therefore begun the process to close all Government of Ghana bank accounts with commercial banks and transfer balances to the central banks. Closed accounts at commercial banks currently stand at 1,985, and the remaining 2,000 accounts is expected to be closed by September 2017. Wage negotiations, Mr. Speaker. In the spirit of completing the 2018 wage negotiations by end April 2017 as required by the PFM Act, we are glad to inform the House that through the tireless effort of the National Tripartite Committee, comprising organized labor and associations, employers association, and government, the 2018 National Daily Minimum Wage was determined. Similarly, the 2018 Public Sector Base Pay has been successfully negotiated by the Public Sector Joint Standing Negotiating Committee to increase by 11% for the 2018 fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, we would like to use the occasion to express our deepest appreciation to organized labor and associations and employers associations for their effective collaboration with government to conclude wage negotiations for 2018, way ahead of the preparation of the 2018 budget. This development will certainly enhance the predictability of the fiscal impact of wage adjustment on the budget. Mr. Speaker, we've also agreed to begin a national conversation with labor to improve its social contracts with government and bring productivity as a key variable for labor negotiations. Mr. Speaker, as part of government's plans to attract foreign investment, government has signed a number of double taxation agreements with countries including Mauritius, Morocco, Czech Republic, the Netherlands, and Singapore. Already we are seeing positive signs of greater investor interest from these countries. Mr. Speaker, improved development cooperation. Government over the past 6 months has taken deliberate steps to re-engage and repair our relationship with our development partners to facilitate development cooperation. We have institutionalized new engagement modalities and platforms to ensure a more open and transparent dialogue. This has led to a restoration of confidence in and support for our economic development agenda. We are witnessing increased financial support and commitment to our development programs. Mr. Speaker, given that economic performance was off track in 2016 and the IMF program was severely compromised, we expect to complete the program through our budget cycle of January 2018 through December 2018 to ensure that we meet the program objectives and targets. It is our expectation that the IMF board would meet in August 2017 to improve the fourth review of the program. Mr. Speaker, another milestone was our successful enrollment as a G20 Africa Compact country. Under the compact, an MOU was signed with Germany, which will trigger a disbursement of 119 million euros. The proposed focal sectors of engagement with Germany are energy, renewable energy, complemented by technical and vocational training, and the financial sector. Mr. Speaker, we have signaled to the market that going forward, our strategy is to tap into non-debt structured financing deals that brings private capital to major infrastructure projects. A key example being the integrated aluminum industry deals championed by His Excellency the Vice President, which involves the development of our bauxite deposits. We will use this strategy to finance major infrastructure projects, including the construction of the Eastern and Central Red Lines and extension of rails to Paga. Mr. Speaker, in March, when I presented the budget, I indicated that we're going through the process of determining the actual state of the distressed economy and to turn it around. The president was elected to get to work with his team to fix a broken economy and to get Ghana working again. That was why our focus, Mr. Speaker, in the first half of the year was to stabilize the economy and re-establish the principles of good economic governance. We are rebuilding the walls of good economic governance. Our belief is that we need to protect the public purse, secure value for money for state resources, and spend the savings made to enhance the lives of those we were elected to serve. We want to provide good economic environment for businesses in particular, and to get Ghana working again. And I'm happy to say that the economy is now stable. Inflation is trending downward. The cedi has stabilized. Interest rates are lower, and there is a general feeling of optimism and hope. Now, that general feeling must be truly felt in the pockets and homes of the people. In 1969, our Prime Minister, Professor Buzia, insisted, and I quote, that the yardstick by which our success or failure should be judged must be the condition of the human being himself. The government is ready to be judged by the standard of living the Ghanaians are able to enjoy and by the degree of cooperation, harmony, and brotherliness in our community life as a nation, unquote. We have spent our first 6 months in office going through a rigorous preparatory process for all the initiatives we announced. We have laid the foundation for successful implementation of our flagship projects, and we believe will turn around the fortunes of this country. The second half of the year will see commencement of actual implementation of our flagship programs. New businesses will be set up under our One District, One Factory program. Existing businesses will be stimulated and rejuvenated, and service delivery in state agencies like sanitation and power will see visible improvements. Our free SHS will be rolled out, and we'll begin the scaling up of our infrastructure projects like rail and roads. Mr. Speaker, we are putting in place measures to strengthen revenue performance to enable us achieve our objectives. In the spirit of prudent economic management, we have revised our expenditures whilst ensuring that we do not compromise on the promises we made Ghanaians. Mr. Speaker, let me take this opportunity as I conclude to celebrate with this august House and our nation that on August 4th, this Friday, will be the 70th anniversary of the founding of the United Gold Coast Convention in Saltpond. Led by two great men, Carl Grant and J.B. Duncan. This, Mr. Speaker, was an era when the nation stood united in the fight for political and economic freedom. Mr. Speaker, 70 years is indeed significant, if not spiritual, and as destiny will have it, it is also at a time when the son of one of the founding fathers is also president of our nation. It is time, Mr. Speaker, to reconnect with total commitment to realizing the dreams of those illustrious stands. We have the strength and the prayers of a hopeful nation to fulfill our manifest destiny. It is time for all of us to take our Nehemiah roles and rebuild both the physical and moral walls of our nation and ourselves. As Pa Grant said at the launch of the UGCC in Saltpond that day, and I quote, "Remember that upon what you do today may depend the happiness of millions of our countrymen and women. But above all," he said, "remember this, we do and plan today. We do and plan not for ourselves alone here and now, but for our country, not only for the generation today, but for generations yet unborn. Mr. Speaker, I so present to this august House to take note of the revisions and so accordingly inform the mid-year fiscal policy review of the 2017 budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, order. Order 70 provides that at this stage, a member may make comment briefly. A comment, honorable members, order. I'm reading from our standing orders so that we proceed within the appropriate parameters. A member may make a comment, not a counter statement. A comment briefly. Any comment shall be limited to facts. It must not provoke debate. Honorable members, order. Honorable members, order. I want us to proceed on our own ground rules so that there's no commotion. Simple. Honorable members, order. The leaders have agreed on 5 from each side, including leadership. Since we have 1 hour for the brief order, for the brief presentations, it means each side will have half an hour, and it also means every member will speak for 5 minutes and leaders for 10 minutes. Honorable order. Honorable Ato Forson. Honorable Ato Forson. Honorable Ato Forson. Honorable Minority Leader, it will come to your turn.
Mr. Speaker,
According to your list.
Mr. Speaker, if you will indulge me, the Honorable Atu Forson, who is our ranking on the economy and matters of finance, will start. But Mr. Speaker, whilst I agree with you that leadership agreed to 5, including the leaders, Mr. Speaker, we did not agree on time, even though at your pleasure, you can say anything you want. We did not, Mr. Speaker, we did not.
Honorable Minority Leader, I'm afraid you are out of order. I did not. Honorable Minority Leader, I did not say you have agreed on time. I said you have agreed on the number of people who will talk.
Yes.
And that, in view of the fact that we have 1 hour, it will be so shared. Honorable Atu Forson, please continue. Honorable Minority Leader, you may give me your formula to apportion the time as each side has equal 30 minutes. Please give me your formula and let's proceed.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to question your ruling and guidance, but may I make a request that in respect of the ranking member, you allow him 10 minutes, because, Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of fairness, we have listened to the minister for an hour or more. It's only appropriate that you give us an opportunity to respond to him. So for the ranking member, 10 minutes. The rest, and then leader, 15 minutes. Then the rest we can manage within 5 minutes. Are you afraid of debate? Let's debate it. Let's debate it. Are you afraid of debate? Let's debate it.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the guidance that you gave us, usually when the statement is made and we have to comment, we operate within 1 hour in commenting on statements. And that is what directive that you have given to us, I think, is very fair. Mr. Speaker, but beyond that, I think Order 98 is very clear to everybody. that the Speaker shall be responsible for the rules of debate. Mr. Speaker, even though this is a statement and we are commenting on that, you are solely responsible for guiding this House. That is what people should understand. Mr. Speaker, let nobody think that anybody is afraid of comments. And it should be stressed, that the opportunity offered at this time is not to provoke a debate, as our orders provide. Mr. Speaker, and that is by Order 70, it is by Order 72. The language and tenor of that construction is plain to everybody, unless people want to reinvent the wheel. But Mr. Speaker, the minority leader has made an application, and it's to the effect that you provide further space to the ranking member to have 10 minutes. Mr. Speaker, we all thought that after 3, maybe members will be exhausted all the time. However, Mr. Speaker, I will join the minority leader. In support of his application that the ranking member be granted 10 minutes. Mr. Speaker, if we have time, and we even told ourselves that the ranking member should be given 30 minutes, we are fair, we are ready to do what it takes. We are ready to do what it takes. If you would indulge the House and would not allow for any repetition, we are ready. We are ready to battle them and show them that it is much ado about nothing. Let's become ready, and maybe we may begin the debate. We may begin the comments. 10 minutes to the ranking member, as we said, 5 to the others, and 10 minutes to the minority leader. And of course, the same will reflect on the majority side as well. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
Honorable Ato Forson, and we shall operate upon the parameters I have set out.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I debate or make a statement, Mr. Speaker, on the media and fiscal policy, Mr. Speaker, before I contribute to the statement.
Honorable,
Mr. Speaker,
before you contribute.
Mr. Speaker, before I contribute to the statement.
You will contribute.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, before I contribute to the statement, it's important that I make this point. Mr. Speaker, all of us seek to deepen the democracy of this country. Mr. Speaker, it is important. It is important that we don't set certain precedent that will go and haunt all of us. Mr. Speaker, based on Section 28 of the Public Financial Management Act, Mr. Speaker, there is no way a media review and economic policy should come on the back of a statement. Mr. Speaker, today is a sad day for our democracy. Today is a sad day for our democracy. Mr. Speaker, let me say, Mr. Speaker, by preventing the minority to debate a major economic policy of government, Mr. Speaker, it's a sad day for our democracy. It's a sad day for our democracy, Mr. Speaker, and this should not be allowed to go. Mr. Speaker, clearly, this is not coming on the back of an information. Mr. Speaker, it is a major revision. Mr. Speaker, based on that, I will make do based on the information that we have.
Honorable member, there are so many parliamentary vehicles to be applied lawfully to revisit even this very matter today. So apply them. You may make a full statement on the matter. You may ask the minister questions. I'm showing you some of the possibilities. You may ask the minister questions. You may make a statement. If you want to make a statement for 30 minutes, nothing prevents you. You see, there are a number of parliamentary mechanisms of doing things rightly. We have 1 hour according to the rules. Take your 1 hour and half of it as 30 minutes, and you may want to apply other mechanisms which are legitimate and parliamentary. You don't have to be told that. Please, contribute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I will make do of the information, Mr. Speaker, that was presented by the Minister responsible for finance. Mr. Speaker, I'm making a statement on a document that I've just received a copy. Mr. Speaker, some of my colleagues who will be making a statement or contribute to the statement don't even have copies of the statement that we are going to make. Mr. Speaker, based on that, Mr. Speaker, from the information that we have heard to date, Mr. Speaker, from the information that we have heard, and the document that have just been given, Mr. Speaker, I rise to say that, unfortunately, the budget is being revised from Asempa budget to Asambone budget. Mr. Speaker, to Asambone budget. Mr. Speaker, I say this because, Mr. Speaker, this is bad news. Bad news for this country. Mr. Speaker, let me make reference to certain statements. Mr. Speaker, page 51. Page 51. Page 51. Mr. Speaker, page 51. Tax revenue. Under tax revenue, Mr. Speaker, from 2007 budget, Mr. Speaker, the tax revenue was projected to be 34.3 billion. 2017, Mr. Speaker, 2017 program, Mr. Speaker, quarter 1 and quarter 2. The program said, Mr. Speaker, the tax as per projected, they are going to rake in a tax of 15.7 billion. Mr. Speaker, to date, the outturn is 13.6 billion. Mr. Speaker, what this means is that the budget, Mr. Speaker, what this simply means is that the government has failed clearly, Mr. Speaker, in inverted commas, to achieve the revenue target. Mr. Speaker, you also notice that non-tax revenue as projected, Mr. Speaker, the program was that from Q1 to Q2, the outturn would be 2.7 billion. Mr. Speaker, the outturn is 2.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, another cut. Mr. Speaker, clearly what this means is that there's a shortfall of almost 600 million Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, put the two together, tax revenue and non-tax revenue. The shortfall so far is 2.7 billion Ghana cedis. 2.7 billion Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, let me take you to expenditure. Mr. Speaker, let me take you to expenditure. Mr. Speaker, the reason why I'm saying this is a Samboni budget is that, Mr. Speaker, look at the expenditure carefully. Page 52. Page 52, Mr. Speaker. In as much as we have paid workers, Mr. Speaker, we are cutting down goods and services budget by 600 million Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, what this simply means is that we are paying workers to sit at government offices, but they will not have tools to work. Mr. Speaker, we are not giving the government offices the opportunity to get the necessary tools to work. Mr. Speaker, we are cutting down their budget. Mr. Speaker, clearly, capital expenditure, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Speaker, that's another worrying one. Mr. Speaker, the program, Q1 and Q2, Mr. Speaker, the program was 2.9 billion. Mr. Speaker, the outturn is 2.4 billion. Mr. Speaker, what simply means is that the contractors, those who are working on our capital project, we are not paying them. Mr. Speaker, there's a shortfall of 600 million Ghana cedis. Shortfall of 600 million Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, let me also say that I am not surprised that Q1, Q2, the outturn from the projected actually outperformed. Mr. Mr. Speaker, I'm not surprised because the numbers that they are showing us are cosmetic. The numbers that we are seeing here are cosmetic. Mr. Speaker, you are accumulating arrests. You are accumulating arrests. You are failing to pay the people. You are failing to pay contractors. Mr. Speaker, this is artificially compressed.
Thank you very much.
Artificially compressed. Mr. Speaker,
thank you.
Again, Mr. Speaker, no.
Order. Honorable Asibe Yeboah. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the statement. Mr. Speaker, almost about a year ago, on 25th July 2016, Minister Setekwe came to this house. He came here, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance was here last year to present to this house a mid-year budget review and supplementary estimates for the fiscal year 2016. Mr. Speaker, in as much as the current finance minister came to do a budget review as required by Section 28 of the PFME, he strayed away from a supplementary estimate. It was well within his power, Mr. Speaker. It was well within his power to seek parliamentary approval to commit additional resources to fund additional expenditures. He said, I'm going to cut my coat according to my size, so he didn't come for a supplementary estimate. Mr. Speaker, on March 2nd, when the minister presented the budget, we didn't have information on the full macroeconomic performance for 2016. Now, the Ghana Statistical Service has updated us, and so we do have the full information for 2016. Mr. Speaker, the deficit for 2016 was 9.3% of GDP. In March, we said the deficit was 8.7. What it means, Mr. Speaker, is that there was some 1 billion Ghana cedis of additional spending that has been uncovered. Mr. Speaker, GDP growth has also been revised downward to 3.5%. Mr. Speaker, the public debt, which was given as 72.5% of GDP, is now 73.1%. What it means is that it is no longer the 122 billion we used to talk about, rather it is 123 billion debt as at the end of 2016. Mr. Speaker, the data that the minister spoke to today, for the 2016 budget, the minister came here in November. Now he came back in July to revise the budget. So you had 7 months to revise the budget. The original budget was supposed to be a GDP of 5.4%. After 7 months, he revised it to 4.6%. We ended up at 3.5%. Inflation, he revised it in July to 10.1%. We ended up at 15.4%. The deficit, he revised to 5.3%. We ended up at 9.1%. Mr. Speaker, presently, Mr. Speaker, between March and now, in March, when the minister came,
1 minute more.
In March, when the minister came, he gave a GDP figure of 6.3%. After 3 months with full information, he is still at the 6.3%. Mr. Speaker, inflation, he said it will end at 11.2%. And he's still at 11.2%. The deficit, Mr. Speaker, instead of a revised higher deficit target, the minister has revised the deficit downward from 6.5% to 6.3%.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Honorable Adongo.
Watch your time.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable members, order. And there will be no interruptions so that everyone can take his or her 5 minutes. Honorable.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. Today we are being told that when a head of a family fails to raise the revenue to feed his children and they sleep with hunger, we should praise them for it. You are supposed to raise revenue and provide services. You have failed. You say we should clap for you. Thank you very much. It is only under this government that you bring a budget that is approved on the 31st. And by the 1st of April, you take credit for January, February, March. It is only under this government. But what is the reality? The reality is very simple. The reality is very, very simple. Figures released by the Ghana Statistical Service indicates that as of June, Ghana's economy minus oil and gas grew by 3.9%. In the same period last year, with our oil, His Excellency John Dramani Mohamed government did 6.3%. Now we are being told that when you move from 6.3% to 3.9%, that is a growth of the economy. We understand. Mr. Speaker, we are told that we are reprofiling our debt and therefore our debt will not go up. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I would like to read the Monetary Policy Committee's own report for July. And the Bank of Ghana's Monetary Policy Committee indicates that the reason for Ghana's growth of debt from 122 billion to 137 billion, and I quote, is as a result of the issuance of long-dated domestic bonds. That is the reality. So when you change your creditor, you change the name of your creditor and you extend your tenure, your debt goes up. The reality is that only in the first quarter of the year, we added 5 billion to our public debt. By May, in 5 months, we increased it to 15 billion. That means in April, we increased it by 5 billion. In May, we increased it by another 5 billion. That tells you that we are growing our public debt by an average 3 billion a month over 5 months. And that is fiscal consolidation. Mr. Speaker, gross international reserves, gross international reserves means nothing if you don't compare the depreciation of the cedi. It is meant to provide cushion for your currency. In the same period last year, our cedi depreciated by 0.04%. Now it did 2.5%. So when you depreciate your cedi by 2.5%, it is better than 0.04%. Where do you get that economy? But Mr. Speaker, we keep being told that His Excellency, former President Kufuor, left Ghana 9.6 billion of public debt. I fear for the scholars of finance and economy when we make this. Where in the world do we use nominal values that have stood for over 10 years to calculate present value? And these are things that our students of finance are learning. You need to understand that 9.6 billion, when you begin to factor in the time value of money, cannot be 9.6 billion. The reality is also that as per Bank of Ghana's own economic and financial data released, Ghana's economies benefited tremendously from oil, whereas last year at the same time, we did only 400 million. By His Excellency John Dramani Mohamed's effort, we did 1.2 billion of oil. Again, the same time last year, whilst we did 2 billion for gold export, we have done 3 billion, an additional 1 billion. Tell me, what did His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo and my brother, His Excellency Vice President, did to ensure that oil grew and gold export increased? Nothing. Is it one village, one dam? Is it one village, one dam? Is it one district, one factory? Is it the army worm? So at the end of the day, you are taking credit when you are yet to be on your feet. Mr. Speaker, this economy is on a life support. Our economy is on a life support, and anything to do propaganda with our economy will continue to expose us. The reality is that we don't have money to pay workers when the month is due. The reality is that we are struggling to even get offices for 110 ministers. The reality is that you have programmed to spend and borrow an additional 3 billion. So in 9 months, you would have doubled Ghana's public debt up to 4 left. Thank you very much.
Honorable Daniel Abuadi. Honorable Daniel Abuadi. Honorable Daniel Abuadi.
Thank you, Mr.
Order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Part of the time is going. Honorable Abuadi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the statement by the Honorable Minister. In doing so, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that today's mid-year budget review is not a sad day. Right. Mr. Speaker, I am told,
honorable members, those who love to make debate chaotic should advise themselves. Honorable, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am told that today's mid-year budget review is different because targets are met and in some cases exceeded. In many cases, the targets have been exceeded. Mr. Speaker, let me give you one example. The overall GDP, our own target for 2017 was 6.3. We're able to achieve 6.6. This needs to be celebrated. Mr. Speaker, fiscal deficit in 2016 for the same period was about 4% of GDP. Our target was 3.5%. And the actual achievement for the period under consideration is 2.7% of GDP. What can you say about this? Mr. Speaker, let me just take us back a little bit. What some of our friends don't understand. We took this country from a position of crisis, and we made sure we had a clear vision to solve the problems of this country. Mr. Speaker, the President was very, very clear in his vision of building a country beyond aid. In so doing, Mr. Speaker, he wanted to use a strategy where, Mr. Speaker, the strategy to achieve this was to create an enabling environment for private sector to do well.
Honorable, please take your seat for a time being. Honorable members, interested Ghanaians are in the gallery. They deserve to hear what is happening in Parliament. When we have time allocated, the least we can do by way of decency is to let every member, any side, make his or her contribution and sit. But you want to ask if there is an obvious attempt to prevent others being heard, should I do in order to ensure that proper debate takes place? Honorable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This budget is not a Sembwani budget. Rather, it is a Sempapa budget. Mr. Speaker, when there is a reduction in expenditure, I think what the minister has done is to be truthful to Ghanaians, especially when there is revenue fall. He realigned the expenditure to margin, just to show responsible economic management. Mr. Speaker, reduction in revenue or even expenses does not mean inefficiency, but it means prudent economic management. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that some of the reasons that have accounted to what we see today are because of prudent economic policies, improved fiscal discipline, and competent management team in the driving seat. I believe, sincerely, Mr. Speaker, that Ghana's good days are just ahead, and that this is just the beginning of great things to come. I believe that Ghana is going to work again. Thank you very much.
Honorable Fifi. Order.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, let's listen. Honorable Fifi Kweti.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to make a few comments on the statement that has been made by the Minister for Finance. To begin with, Mr. Speaker, we need to be grateful that we have today an opposition responsible enough not to even question the credibility of the statistical service that had provided a lot of these figures today. That actually is a positive departure from what we used to have in the past. Mr. Speaker, I've heard the Finance Minister speak eloquently about the very competent manner in which he and his team have managed the economy. Let me congratulate him and also to tell him to hasten slowly. When he reaches a moment where inflation has gone down into single digits and kept there for a period of 3 years, he can come for some boasting. When he reaches a moment when he's able to grow the economy of Ghana to at least 14%, he can come for some praises. When he's able to reach a moment when he's able to take treasury bills down to below 10% to about 9%, he can come for some praises. Until then, it's important for the Minister of Finance to hasten very slowly because he has not achieved anything yet. Mr. Speaker, I also overheard the minister say that he inherited a very weak economy. That's always very debatable, because Mr. Speaker would have thought that if somebody inherited an economy at the time when the gross reserves of the country stood at 1.8 months of cover, and then you are inheriting 2.8 months of cover, you clearly cannot be talking about a weak economy, because what you left behind at the time actually was almost in a state of comatose. But we didn't make that kind of comment. Mr. Speaker, if somebody met 18% inflation in 2009, and you are meeting inflation that is 15.4, declining downward, you obviously know that you're inheriting a much better economy than what somebody inherited before you. Mr. Speaker, if somebody dealt with interest rates Treasury bill rate of 25% in 2009, and you actually met that 16%. And for you to be talking about a weak economy, you obviously are not being very truthful. So, Mr. Speaker, it's important for some of these facts to be stated clearly in order for us to be able to have a very good debate. But, Mr. Speaker, bottom line has to do with the fact that the major things that you have promised to the people of Ghana, nothing has been heard so far. Cost of living to the people of Ghana, that's the most important. What really is being happening to it? Nothing much. You talk about free SHS. And as of now, we have a situation where you are literally running away from the very thing you spoke about. Continuing students are totally being left in the lurch. And you are now talking about some few students who will actually qualify to inherit a free. That's not good. Mr. Speaker, talking about jobs and jobs. We should be talking about a situation where the people of Ghana can be talking positively about jobs. But really, for all that you've spoken about declining, indicators that are getting better and better, the job for the young people of Ghana today is not available. They cannot even be talking with any hope about jobs. So it's important for us to hasten very slowly in order to be able to know exactly where this country is going. And the final thing, Mr. Speaker, I will say is this, that for all that the minister has both said about, the revenue performance clearly showed that we did not really see any creativity by way of revenue policies. Otherwise, we should not be talking about missing revenue targets today, and we now talking about exactly the same problem that we used to have in the past. So, Mr. Minister, it's important to hasten slowly because the journey is very long, and the reality will soon dawn. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Honorable Fifi, thank you for keeping within the time. And honorable members, thank you for silence in allowing him to speak. Honorable Kweku Kwat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kweku Kwat has stated his
order. The only person who can tell the honorable member on her feet to sit at this stage is the honorable majority leader who has given me his list. Please, let's know what we are about in this house. Honorable, if you are so appointed by the majority leader to speak, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the statement read by my honorable minister. Mr. Speaker, the minority said they inherited an import cover of 1.8 months and 9.